kind of open up this box and look at when we start consolidating those schools, where we had 2 schools on one campus. Remember, they were all one school on the campus, and those schools held 900 elementary school students. Middle schools held 1,000 students in years where they weren't failing schools. But the minute we decided to reform, because there was a little bit of mess going on socially, we reformed and 90% of my schools are failing. So we talk
Spearman?
about quality. You know, those are some of the things I'd like to see. And I do appreciate some of this work that's been done. But I don't see any consideration. My district, I believe, has the largest amount of schools of any district in this city, mainly because we created a lot of schools. So when we created a lot of schools, bottom line, we created 2 schools on several campuses. And when we
schools on 2 campuses.
several schools on
Oh,
one
several.
campus.
Oh, I'm sorry.
On one
I'm
campus, so, you know. What's disappointing to me is that we have not used this criteria to consolidate some of those 2 schools on the same campus, only the high schools. So when we look at the elementary schools, that we have this proliferation in my district, and the great experiment of creating these schools, the facilities held more students that they have when you combine them. So I had asked the question from the beginning, what would it look like if we started consolidating some of these elementary schools? And when we look at consolidating the elementary schools, does it mean because one gets QUIA money or one gets TIG money that they still can't be combined? And looking at the way that we're being real creative with using after-school funds when it comes to these high schools. So if we can get real creative using the funds the way that we're trying to do it now, then we can be real creative using SIG money and TIG money. So I would like to see some of the schools in my district. I'd like to see what would it look like if you put consolidations on the list. I also look at the list, and the schools that are in my district that are on the list, sorry to say, are predominantly African American, and they're single schools. And that's a problem, because we only have 3 that have a large population of African Americans. And why would those be the schools that were singled out? The facilities of these schools are small anyway. So, you know, I think we need to be very considerate about that.
And those 3 items, Dr. Smith, the first was the question about schools sharing a single campus. So is that considered in the criteria?
Thank you. One place I could perhaps invite the board to pay attention, as well as the audience, is page number 22 of the presentation packet. Page number 22 presents all of the schools based on step number 1, which is addressing this essential question of where do we need to operate schools. And it looks at all schools as individual schools. And if you were to go down from 1 as identifying schools where they are least needed to schools that are most needed, if you go on to the second page, 23, in that range of located where they are most needed, I'll read off some of the shared campus schools, starting at the top. Esperanza International Community School, Esperanza number 38, International Community School number 39, New Highland Academy number 43, Fred T. Korematsu number 45, Rise number 52, Futures Academy number 54, Learning Without Limits, number 58, Community United, number 59, Global Family School, number 60. So this criteria applies these 12 data points to all schools, and when applied to these schools as individual schools, the vast majority of them are already located in what would be defined in areas of the greatest need to operate a school. We also ran, what's not presented here, and we can present, we also ran these same schools if they were a single school, to just essentially ask the question, do we need to operate any school program there at all? And when you host them as a combined school, the shared schools that are in the least needed area of number 19, Acorn Woodland, Manzanita Seed, number 21, Encompass, number 26, Manzanita Community, number 29, and Think College Now, number 32. As a combined school campus, they all drop down into the section of most needed, and in fact, located in the places we most need a school program are actually Community United and Futures, Learning Without Limits, and Global Family. So the data would suggest that where we are currently hosting two elementary schools on a single campus, and the same is actually true for our middle schools. We have one middle school site currently that hosts 2 6-8 programs, which is the Elmhurst campus of Alliance and Elmhurst Community Prep. When you analyze those schools as a single campus, they become number 12 on the list, the most needed place where we have students in 6-8 that would need to be served. So what this suggests to us is that it's a programmatic question versus a question of whether or not we would close a school when it comes to where we have shared campuses. And Mr. Howell could undoubtedly present either some basic information tonight or some additional information at the time of recommendation about the difference in terms of the opportunity to release resources between an actual campus closure, which is what the criteria in many cases would get at, versus the merging of two schools on a single campus. There is reason for us to nonetheless consider programmatically whether or not the continued strategy on each of those campuses is serving students. That would likely fall into the next round of discussion about things like performance and sustainability of those programs. But in terms of this first essential question of where do we need to operate schools, what the criteria has identified for us is that those are campuses located in places where we need to operate schools. And the question about whether or not we continue to operate the two individual school programs would be more programmatic.
But